Hi, everybody. Welcome to your Read Aloud video for Beating the British. Now, for this reading, I am going to read and I will pause occasionally to prompt you to answer some of the questions. So please make sure the questions are in front of you. I have already labeled the reading on the screen so that you can see where you will find those questions. And you should definitely pause the video when I prompt you to so that you can highlight the answers. So our reading today is called Beating the British. It was very late at night on August 29th, 1776, but the American troops were not sleeping. They were climbing into rowboats and barges as quietly as they could. A tall man on a horse signaled for the boats to shove off. Everybody was tense and nervous. If there were any noise, all might be lost. The British were only a few hundred yards away. Earlier that day, they had beaten the Americans, beaten them badly. They were only waiting until morning when they could attack again and force the Americans to surrender. If they had known what was happening now, they would surely have marched on the Americans and crushed them. The Americans were stranded on the western shore of Long Island. Their only hope was to secretly cross over a river to the island of Manhattan. Luckily, the river was unusually calm. A thick fog concealed any movement. 9,000 American soldiers made the trip that night across the dark waters of the East River. So please pause, and you're going to look to highlight the answer to question 1 and 2, which you'll find in this paragraph here. Where was the American army trapped in the beginning of the reading, and how many American soldiers escaped across the East River? Please pause the video now. Okay, we're ready to begin again, picking up where we left off. When everyone else was safely across, the tall man dismounted from his horse and got into the last boat. He was George Washington, commander of the American army. He was completing one of the most brilliant retreats in American military history and barely saving his troops from disaster. So pause here and answer the question for number 3. Who was the commander of the American army? Okay, we're going to pick up where we left off. Washington had now been the commander of the American army for more than a year. He had taken charge on July 3rd, 1775, 2 weeks after the Battle of Bunker Hill. In Washington's first year as commander, there had not been much fighting. A small force of Americans had marched through the northern woods in a daring attempt to capture Quebec. The attempt had failed. British ships had attacked Charleston Harbor in South Carolina, but they had been badly damaged by shells fired from American cannons. The biggest event in the first year of war did not involve armies. It was a decision of the American leaders who attended the Second Continental Congress. Early in July 1776, they declared that they were no longer British subjects. Instead, they announced that the 13 colonies were now free and independent states. After this, Washington's job was to win American independence on the battlefield. He just barely succeeded. The war for American independence lasted for 7 hard years. Many times the British had a chance to crush Washington's army. With a little luck, they might have trapped Washington at the Battle of Long Island. Not many people gave the colonies much chance of winning a war against Britain. After all, the British seemed to have most of the advantages on their side. So please pause the video. You are looking for the answer to question 4. How long did the war for American independence last? And you'll find that answer in this paragraph. All right, let's start looking for question 5. And this is where we're going to hear about some of the advantages that the British Army had. An advantage is something that makes you better than your enemy or your opponent. For one thing, they had a better army. The men in it were all professional soldiers. They knew how to march together in perfect order to the signal of a drum. They were trained to load and fire their guns together as if they were machines. This army was assisted by another strong force at sea. The British had the largest navy in the world. So you're looking to highlight some answers to question 5. What advantages did the British Army have? Okay, we're going to continue now, and you're going to be looking for what problems or disadvantages did the American Army have in the next 2 paragraphs. The colonies had no warships. Their army, the Continental Army, started out with part-time fighters. Most of the men and boys who fought and died on Long Island were poorly trained for battle. They had a lot of courage, but little skill. Many of them did not understand how to use their bayonets. They were not used to obeying orders. The captains who tried to lead them often did not know what they were doing. At first, American soldiers provided a further problem. They would sign up for a few months of service, then quit and leave for home. In the winter of 1777, most of Washington's army disappeared. He had only 3,000 men left, while the British had 20,000. So please pause the video and highlight what problems or disadvantages did the American Army have, and you should highlight information in both of these paragraphs here. All right, we're going to continue, and we're going to go back to what advantages did the British Army have for question 5, and I'd like you to highlight one more thing, one more fact from the reading to answer that question. It costs a lot of money to feed and equip an army. Here, too, the British had a big advantage. They had enough money to pay thousands of German soldiers to fight with them in America. Washington, on the other hand, had a very hard time raising money. The Continental Congress had... got an announcement here.
Notice for bus riders 521. Bus 521 will not be here at dismissal. You will have to stay after and wait for the late bus or make other arrangements to go home. Thank you.
All right, let's continue there. The Continental Congress had practically no power to collect taxes. State governments could raise taxes, but they usually failed to raise enough. The paper money that Washington used to pay his soldiers was almost worthless. One group of soldiers once showed how much they thought this money was worth. They made coats and pants out of it and wore it as a joke. So pause the video, and you are looking for one advantage the British Army had here, and then jumping to question 7, why did Washington have trouble raising money for his army in this section of the paragraph? Okay, continuing. Without enough men or money, Americans could not defend their cities. They had trouble in Boston in 1775. They lost New York in 1776 and Philadelphia in 1777. They had to give up Savannah, Georgia in 1778 and Charleston, South Carolina in 1780. And yet the Americans finally defeated a superior British army. How? They were able to win for 4 main reasons. Because they had something to fight for. A writer's pen is sometimes more powerful than a soldier's sword. Great words and ideas can move people to keep fighting even when all seems lost. Powerful words came easily to 2 American writers, Thomas Paine and Thomas Jefferson. In 1776, they persuaded thousands of people that America had a right to be independent. Americans understood that they were fighting for their lives and their liberty. Why was the British soldier fighting? mainly because fighting was his job. So you're going to pause the video here and you are looking for question 8. What 2 American writers inspired Americans to fight for their liberties? And you only need to highlight their names. All right, we're going to continue with question 9. Why was fighting on home ground an advantage for the Americans? Because they were fighting on home ground. North America was a vast continent. It was almost too big for foreign troops to conquer. The British could not be everywhere at once. If they won a battle in the north, they still had trouble in the south. If they marched to the south, Washington's army was still a threat in the north. American troops lost more battles than they won, but they always managed to slip away from final defeat. One American general, Nathanael Greene, explained how his troops just wore out the British. He said, "We fight, get beat, rise, and fight again." So please pause the video and answer question 9 by highlighting why was fighting on home ground an advantage for the Americans. And in the next paragraph, we will find the answer to question 10. Highlight 2 or 3 things that made Washington a great general. Because they had determined leadership. Some of the British generals were lazy. They made foolish, careless mistakes. After winning a battle, they often relaxed, allowing Americans to escape. But the American leader, George Washington, stayed with his job through victory and defeat. He knew when to attack the enemy and when to retreat. Even more important, he worked day and night with his soldiers. He got them to drill and fight. He won their respect and admiration. He was able to keep an army together even in the cold winter months when everyone wanted to quit. So please pause the video and highlight the answer to question 10. All right, because the French helped them. You're looking for the answer to question 11. What country joined the American side after 1777? I bet you can guess the answer. Americans fought alone for only a short time. After 1777, they were joined by England's old enemy, France. The French gave ships and money. They also sent many soldiers, including the remarkable Marquis de Lafayette. This young man had been inspired by the ideals of the American cause. He arrived in America in July 1777 and offered his services to Washington. He fought bravely with the Americans for the rest of the war. The help given by Lafayette and other French people gave the Americans new hope. Partly because of this help, the United States is now an independent nation. These were not the only reasons why Americans won their war for independence. They were also lucky. For example, fog covered Washington's troops as they retreated from the Battle of Long Island. On a clear night, the British might have seen what was happening, and that probably would have been the end of Washington and his army. Americans needed some luck to win, but they also needed great courage and determination. They had plenty of this, as you will see in the chapters that follow. Well, luckily, you don't have to read any of those chapters because we're going to have a video that covers the war itself. But I do need you to answer one more question. How did this country help the Americans? I forgot about that one. It is here, and here you'll find the answer to question 12. And that will complete our video. So thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful. We'll see you next time.